let it flow, you the waterfall. Go when you're low. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Robin Gould. I'm so glad to see you today. I'm glad that you joined in to kind of talk about some of the things with the portion today that we are going to discuss. We're going to go beyond the portion a little bit because I think there's some associated topics that I think would be interesting to tackle. And I always want to take advantage of linking things together. So remember that the future begins now, and here at lamnetwork.tv, which is Messianic Lamb Network, where you can find these programs. We believe in now and being present now. We also are always knowing now it turns into a future. So let's create the future that we want now. And so that will start with being present and just being together and celebrating how to live a godly Torah pursuant lifestyle full of joy and acceptance and love. And that would be, I would say, the goal. So let's start getting into our work today. What we're going to talk about. The Torah portion this week is called Ki Titzai. I mean, I'm not going to pronounce that right, but Titzai, I think that's how it is. But I'm always very insecure about all my pronunciations, even though everybody seems to pronounce everything differently anyway. But this would be Deuteronomy 21:10 through 25:19. I'm going to talk a bit about that just from a general perspective, but I want to get into what is in the Brit Hadashah and look at there's something that was mentioned in that where we portion out also the Newer Testament. And I want to talk a little bit about that. So we won't get too far or deep into this Deuteronomy stuff. And the reason being is that not only have I covered a lot of it in a lot of other programs, but everyone's covering the portion. I mean, you can go and get all kinds of things, but I also want to let you know that I do cover quite a bit of the things that are discussed here in my marriage and divorce and remarriage in the Bible, because we talk about a lot of the marital law that's discussed there, and we put this together. One of the things that comes up all the time when this part of the Bible is discussed, which is really disheartening to me, but at the same time, it's a reflection of what's happened in society. And I was actually just on a radio show this morning. We were talking about what's going on with this whole idea of taking an ancient Near Eastern document and trying to transpose on that modern Western paradigm, and trying to think that this is an instruction book written then for a paradigm now. It doesn't work in these certain ways, not when there's cultural implications that differ from cultural implications now. So past cultural perspectives and paradigms are very different from the ones we have now. So if we're going to understand any of this, we have got to go back. If you want to glean principles from an ancient document, you better learn ancient culture. And then you better understand where it differs from your present situation so that context won't be disrupted. Because that's how bad, weird cults form. And that's how damaging sexual politics blossom into strange religious systems that damage everybody and disrupt attachment. And if you know me and if you're familiar with this program, you know that I'm an attachment specialist. That's what I do. And when I see this happening, it's very disheartening to me. And so I'd like you to be able to rise out of that in a way that I have really finally, over years of study, been able to, and not perfectly in every way, but I continue to learn, and I would really love to help you learn some of these things. So one of the things that comes up quite a bit is this: everything just feels very patriarchal, like really much women are being singled out for punishment where men are not. Okay, so I want to just say this a little bit. First of all, first principle of attachment in terms of the way that I want to talk about the Bible is to remember that when you're born again, you become a kid, a baby, really a baby. And a lot of the times I talk about this in this program. When you think about, you're a child. When we think we're on God's level and we understand him at our level, we seek to bring him to our level, or we seek to rise to his, rather than everybody staying in their station where we're human and he's divine. Okay, he's God, we're not. We are not God. We are not in control. We don't know everything. And when Adam and Hava tried to be like God, thinking they could glean the knowledge to judge good and evil, that was not okay. That was not right. And they hid after they did it because they knew they had done wrong. They were confounded about their identity. They covered up their nakedness with fig leaves. And rather than running to the Father for restoration, they hid from him with his creation, confounded about their identity. Therein lies the biggest story of humanity, from which we should in every way glean. Everything we need to know about people is in that one story. There was no culture then. There were people that lived in the utopia the Father created with free will for them. So that story is cut and dry and plain to see. Now, is it told in an ancient Near Eastern fashion? Absolutely. We do need to understand that. But we have to kind of embrace that to understand what I'm going to talk about today, because the Torah portion talks about divorce and marriage and the value of women and all these things. And so a lot of people say, well, it seems really unfair that the woman is called out for punishment if she does sexual sin, we're not the man. Okay, why is adultery? Why is the definition of adultery, that it would be a married woman, but a man could have other people, other wives or whatever? Why is this? Okay. So that's coming from the sexual politics that we deal with now, that I believe emerged out of toxic patriarchy, and doesn't understand where it says, the wife's body is not her own, or the husband's body is not his own. Polarizing that, meaning everybody is going to take care of themselves for the union, and the union serves the people rather than the people serving the union. Okay, there's really important points here that take some teasing apart to understand. But here's what I want to say. Taking that to the side for a second. Women, you are not being singled out because you deserve more punishment. You are singled out because you are the representation in your physical form, in being female, of the bride the Father pursues, that God Elohim pursues with vigor, with an agenda of protecting and caring for and marrying her. So if you look at this, your status is elevated, if anything. Not to the point of goddess worship, because then we're back to Eve, right? We're back to Hava doing that. But women, you are not being singled out in a negative way. Your role as not being defiled is to underscore to you how important people are to God. That's what that is. And that's a very important thing to understand, that part of our brain needs to wrap around, is how important people are to God and how protected they should be. He does not want other people to defile the beautiful bride. So this is not a shame piece for women to feel, to be a woman is just no. There are so many aspects of being a woman that are misunderstood, because we come at them angry because of crimes against women that have already been committed and become norms that we're fighting against now, but had nothing to do with this time in history that this Bible's written. Okay, very important, important point. And I know David Wilbur has a book called Is God a Misogynist? And it's a great book that tackles some of these questions, and I very frequently recommend that to people. Check it out. Get that on Amazon. David Wilbur is his name. So check that out. But women are valuable, and women are the hope diamond, protected and kind of secure, and you don't just barge in and think you can have your way with her. There's going to be issues. And so there's just a lot more to that we could talk about, and it could take actually it would go beyond the scope of a couple things I want to talk today, because I'm not going to just get halfway into it and then not get all into it. But I think we will do programs that just focus on like one of the points, and then we really develop it. And the more you learn about how this document has been misinterpreted, the more you're going to go through a range of emotions. You're going to be really angry and upset and like, why didn't this come out sooner? Well, you know, we don't know. People arrive at information when they arrive at information. Some people are awake, some people are not. I don't know. If you're going to spend your time and allot your energy toward trying to figure that out, why? Just know that you know things now, you're learning things now. Let go of all that disappointment. That disappointment is going to breed hostility and resentment. And living in that is not joyful. And we do deserve, because our Father made us, the joy, because his joy is our strength. So our strength is his joy. So there's a connection there between strength and joy. So we're not going to be weakened with our resentments and our regrets. We're going to repent. We're going to walk on. We're going to move on and move forward, because the future begins now. We're not going to sit back on our heels complaining about the past anymore. There's a time to grieve, and there's a time to stop grieving. And now is the time to look at what we need to know about who we are and what our identity is. We are back to Genesis, okay? Very important. Because as of the days of Noah, global stuff happens. See anything global going on? For sure, as in the days of Noah, something global, something divisive, something really important is happening. So I want to get into, so read the portion, go to Deuteronomy and read all that stuff. I do illuminate a bunch of it in my book, cheap, inexpensive, short book. Go ahead and order that. Check that book out. Check out David Wilber's book. But let's talk a little, because I mentioned the Genesis story, which I mostly always do in my programs because it's so central to the way to think about everything. That's why it's the very first story about people. Okay? Because the essence of the Father, of the image of God, was Adam and Chava together. But for hope to exist, this was separated, so it can come together in humility and find this beauty and see the different aspects of the image of Elohim and what that looks like. And when that comes back together, ooh, this is very exciting. So I want to talk a little bit about the lesson of the fig tree, because that's the Brit Hadashah portion of today's portion. So this is in Matthew 24. And I want to just talk, let's see here, make sure my mouse is working. Where am I? Okay. This is what it says, and I'm going to, and I quote, from the fig tree, learn its lesson. Okay, so many times you see that, many times you will see actually that, hold on one second here. I'm just going to have to fix part of my computer. There we go. Sorry. I just have something blinking. There we go. Okay, so forgive that. Okay, so from the fig tree, learn this lesson. Now, the fig tree is central to that first story that we learned from about Adam and Chava, about what the image of Elohim is and how we are not to try to be like him. We are to worship him. We are to depend on him. We are to enjoy him and allow him to enjoy us. We are to listen to him. We're to learn and study about him, and we are to get close to him and be bonded with him, not to try to be him. And it was particularly fig leaves, that's specific, that covered up, that they plucked off the tree to cover their nakedness. So that would be, because they were ashamed, which meant confounded. That word means confused. What were they confused about? About who they were. Because they tried to rise up out of what they were into what he is, and then they were confused about everything. They were confused because they didn't know they should run to the Father for restoration, so they were not quite sure that they were his kids. that they were his, that they were human. And so they had to leave that area to go figure out how they're kids. So parents do this all the time. When our children demonstrate that an event or some sort of something exceeds their abilities, we remove the children from that situation so they can realize. So there are times where your children will say, you know, I am an adult and I can drive a car. And you'll say, no, you are 3 years old and you can't drive a car. I mean, this sounds like a ridiculous conversation, but if you ever had a 3-year-old, a 3-year-old might want to drive the car. They might not even think about driving the car. Depends on the 3-year-old. My first son, when he was 3, wanted to drive the car. You put them in front, on the seat in front of all the gears, and if they look at the gears and think that just looks fun, I'm going to take this car out for a spin. I mean, obviously, the child can't even reach the pedals, so they're not going to go far. But what if you have a child who's 7? They can reach the gears. They're taller than most, I don't know, whatever. They can reach the gears and they can try to drive this car, but they don't know how to drive the car. You have to take the child out of the car. You have to keep the keys away from the child. I mean, I actually can't tell you how many times I've seen on the news. I went on this YouTube video and they were talking about kids driving and taking the cars. It was actually a little thing about all these kids that have done that. But they thought they could be the parent, and what did they do? One kid like smashed into like a pig farm fence, and but all of these stories to say, you know, we're kids, we're not God. And so it's interesting that the Brit Hadashah in Matthew 24, it says, from the fig tree, learn its lesson. Try to make sure this is wrong with my mouse. I don't know why my mouse is so tempestuous. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. Okay, this is very interesting to me. Now, obviously, there's an agricultural component to this, and the Father teaches us through agriculture for sure. Like he teaches us, you know, how to understand him through, you know, the seeds and the soil and the plants. Nothing different here. He's using agriculture. He's asking you to generate an image of something that you're familiar with and learn how it applies to people. But it says when the branch becomes tender and it puts out its leaves, then you're going to know summer is near. So summer would be like the time when things would be being rained on and growing. A lot of planting is being done. A lot of planting happens in the summer. And then you have your different harvests, right? That happen, you know, in the spring and the fall. But the summer is like the planting and the plowing. Okay, so the seeds, right, get scattered and all that. So connect this with me. The branch becomes tender, so it's going to put out its leaves, its coverings. Now, we need shade from trees, and there's examples of that in the Bible, right? The fathers are shade from the heat. Shade is produced by trees many times. So the branch becomes tender and a leaf comes out. And that's when you know summer is near, that lots of seeds are going to be planted. So I'm connecting this, I'm re-engineering this, I'm going back. Summer is near and the leaves are right there. Well, think of that first story in Genesis. Yes, there's going to be opportunities to stand under the fig tree and enjoy what the Father made, or pluck that creation off and try to be God yourself and create the shade by detaching it from its source. I think there's a very big lesson there. Summer near, here's the planting. So also, when you see these things, know that he is near at the very gates. Now, this suggests something end timesy and now timesy, right? I mean, this is how I see it. You're getting my personal view and take on this. Truly, I say to you, so like he's making a point. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So you're saying he's bringing this into a much bigger picture, but I also think he's bringing this into a personal picture. Because what does it mean when he is near? Okay, so if the planting is happening, of course he's near. What's being planted? I do know what's planted is ragweed around me. So look at that. But the fig tree is a lesson, because the branch becomes tender and a leaf happens. Now, who makes the branch? Elohim does, right? And when it becomes tender, he has created the system that it would be tender, which makes me know he's tender to even give us leaves for shade, because he loves you. He wants to cover you. And in fact, he did cover Adam and Hava with animal skins, because he's showing them, I'm going to take something from creation that I choose. And it's not going to be a leaf that will wither. It's this skin I make on a living being that will last. It's going to be, have fur and be very sturdy. But the message here is that right before the seeds, I'm going to provide you with the shade, or you're going to just grab what you want, and I'm going to give you the opportunity, because free will is the only way to love. There's not this choice where it's like, love me or just burn in hell. There's no free will in that. That doesn't exist. This idea of, well, I guess I'll love you, because that doesn't sound good. The fig leaf is an example of free will. It'll be there. You have the power to pluck it off and try to be God. But why would you? Well, maybe it's because you don't trust God will be God. Maybe Adam and Hava didn't trust God. And he had to show them, you can trust me. And in fact, I'm going to give you many opportunities to see how you can trust me out there. But in here, you weren't seeing that you had to trust me. You had everything. Even the water came in from the ground as a mist. It hadn't even rained. Everything was there for you to tend to, and everything was there. But you need to go out and toil in the soil and see what seeds do, and see what growth is like, and see the creation I made. And when you see how amazing this is, when you see how incredible and amazing this creation is and how it works, you're going to know how great I am. And when you know how great I am, you're going to know that you don't need to know what all the gears in the car are, because I'm going to drive you where you need to go. And in fact, I'm going to pick out the places I take you that are good for you. I'm not going to take you to the dump and drop you off. I'm going to take you to the dentist. I'm going to drive you to a playgroup. I'm going to take you to school. I'm going to take you to the picnic. Okay? The more complicated everything can look, the more you trust as a kid, wow, my dad knows how to drive this. But when we get to this place in our world where we say, I can do this, you forget who you are and you become confounded, and you're just grabbing the fig leaf, that tender branch the Father made to provide shade for you. You're going to grab it off. And here's where I want to go with our message today. We're halfway through already. Okay. Because he says, when you see these things, know that he is near at the gates. He's right there. As you're going through this process, he is right there. He is with you. He's at the gates. And then he talks about this whole generation isn't even going to pass away until all of this free will stuff is done. And heaven and earth are going to pass away. And he says, but my words won't change. I am the good parent. I don't change. I'm not going to be your friend except where it would be friendly, but I'm always going to maintain that presence of guidance, protection, sustenance, restoration, whatever it is you need in any given moment, you're going to get it from your parent. It's really beautiful. And nobody knows that day or hour. Nobody knows, which means it's the great equalizer. Our ignorance is the great equalizer, unless you don't know you're ignorant, and then you're just really stupid, right? But when you know you don't know, how wise and smart is that? That's why I love leaning on the Hillel calendar. One of the things, I'm not going to pretend I know this. I don't care how many times I've studied it out. They all make sense. I don't have enough belief in myself that I'm going to figure this out. I think that's what it means why no one knows the day or hour. Anyway, that's just me about the moon, but not even the angels of heaven or the sun, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So you're warned, you're loved, you're here, I'm here. You are not going to be able to figure all this stuff out. For as in those days before the flood, what were they doing? Eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. So this symbolizes like safety, protection, initiative, right? Like initiative to ascertain those things in your life within the realm of what is your responsibility, what you're sovereign over for yourself, while not infringing on the sovereignty he has over you as your protector, right? They were unaware of the flood until it came and swept them all away. And that's going to be like the coming of man. So what he's saying is they didn't have eyes to see. They chose not to have eyes to see. Now, a lot of people think, well, that's nice. Thanks for people who were ignorant. No, it was people who refused to admit they were ignorant. There's a big difference there. And then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Meaning you're going to see divisiveness, right? People are going to be divisive. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and one will be left. I wonder what takes them away. Something keeps people separate. Something is taking people away. So stay awake because you do not know when that's going to happen, but you're going to get a hint because there's going to be something global happening. So here's where I want to go and spend our last bit of time here. A lot of people talk about, it just really goes into this marriage topic. And the portion today just kind of was really illuminating that to me today about marriage, and where a lot of people, a lot of religious systems forget that marriage was made for people. It's an institution to serve people so that people can live better lives. But as a marriage therapist, there are times I will see people that are like literally victims of their marriage because they're constantly challenged and depleted and debased and just always upset in their marriages. Now, while I would say I believe divorce to be the last resort, because that means hearts have gotten hard, and that's why we're given the option of divorce, because we have to have a way to manage broken marriage contracts. That's how that works. But it does happen. And that the time when we enter into that, and that's a sober decision that people make. And I work with people. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I mean, there are times I help people out of their marriages in ways that would cause less harm to their children and to their, families and to themselves and to their spouse or whatever. So we try to work on that. But one of the things that people get very confused about, and I want to just tease these 3 things apart, is when we make decisions about our lives, especially decisions as huge as that, we need to know what we need to know that we know the best that we can about what's happening to us. What are we doing? So what I want to talk about is I want to kind of take some principles here, and I want to talk about idolatry, because we've discussed last week was a big thing with idolatry, and a lot of people will, and I was actually talking about this morning with a friend. We were doing an interview on her radio show, and we were talking about actually marriage becoming an idol. And that's something that's happened in, I would say, the church quite a bit, where no matter what's happening, you don't ever imagine that you will leave in that relationship. Like this is where a lot of domestic violence goes unchecked in religious systems, because people think that's okay. They think that's fine. They think that's all right. Now, it's not all right. It is not all right to beat and harm each other and abuse each other, right? That's not what marriage was created for. Marriage was not created and instituted and rules and laws set around it for people to become victims of it. It is intended to serve the community, to strengthen the community, and to make serving God and raising children better, easier, and wonderful, right? That's what marriage is supposed to be. It doesn't mean it's always a walk in the park. Marriage is very, very hard, especially now, where marriage is just so optional and frivolous now in so many ways, right? Well, back in the day, the Bible's being made. This is not a frivolous act. People needed to be married to survive, right? But when you serve something at the expense of everything good, right? That's idolatry. Now, here's the thing. Having an idol is different than worshiping God. God doesn't call himself an idol. So an idol, if you think about it, let's go back to what they understood idolatry to be. Now, these were perverted little g gods that operated in the absolute opposite way of the way the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob operated. And he even would say, you do idolatry, sometimes they even pass their babies through the fire. Like those little g gods in those fake religions, they wanted you to circumvent your own maternal instincts. And for you to gain blessing or favor, you had to take your offspring and kill it to serve that little g god. What? How on earth is this little g god that was the creator, as far as they were concerned, the minister of the biggest death, and goes against the way you're made, which is to protect your kids? And when I say maternal instinct, I also mean paternal instinct, because men have instincts too, to protect their children. But they were to circumvent all of those instincts planted in them by the actual creator and do that. I mean, that's just an example of these little g gods. Fast and hurt your body to the point that you've shown your piety. No. We have one day of fasting, that's the national holiday. We have other days of fasting to commemorate atrocities, not to commit an atrocity to show how much we care about the Father. Totally different things. Standing in solidarity with others who have suffered is different from, does it make you happy that I suffer? So sometimes we template the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob after these Roman, Greek, ancient Mesopotamian gods, right? Like we do that. We don't even mean it. But that comes as an undertone of like, if I'm happy, it must be a sin. If I enjoy that, it must be wrong. Please understand what idolatry is. It's where you're serving something at the expense of everything good that the Father has given you to have sovereignty over. He's given you stewardship over certain things, and you are going against that. When you have a baby, you have stewardship over, you are a steward of that child's life to direct it and protect it and love it and guide it the best you can until they reach an age where it's their job to go and do that for someone else that they make. Not to kill it and sacrifice it and ignore it and not bond with it because you're preoccupied with religion or money or whatever else you're doing. Hobbies, whatever. Now that doesn't mean moms and dads shouldn't have money and hobbies and enjoy things and let their kids see life's fun too. Life's fun. Nothing wrong with that. But idolatry, these were these idols, right? Sometimes they were small. You could pack them in your little saddle and sneak them off. Sometimes they were huge. Sometimes they were just the forces of nature, which is really insulting to the Creator that you would take that all the great stuff he made in this planet and credit something else. And that those something else hurt They would hurt the people. People's belief in them would drive them to do these atrocious acts. Idolatry. It's really important. We do not commit idolatry. That was the ultimate form of adultery against God, right? Often included things like blood rituals, right? Oh, death, maiming yourself, just like blood and all this gore. Ugh, right? Now, a lot of people might look at the temple and say, but that's all bloody and gory. They don't understand the temple. I don't understand the temple. I read and learn from people like Rico and Dina Dye. Like, I learn from people, and Joseph Good. I love learning about the temple. I still don't understand it all. But I'm a kid just looking at the gears. I'm walking into the plane, looking at the pilot situation going, wow, that is some intelligent pilot. I would never know how to do that. Idolatry is where you serve something that hurts you that isn't your real father. Okay, let's just understand that. Now, a lot of people will say, okay, so the marriage is, say there's a situation of domestic violence. That person is being beaten by their spouse. And they keep going back because they feel like that makes them holy. That would be where people would idolize their marriage, because they would submit to something that is against them and not serving them and not in the way marriage is to function. And they're picking that over Elohim's system. That's idolatry, right? Now, here's where I want to separate something. We have addictions and we have idolatry. That's different. Idolatry is where we are sometimes actually addicted. Okay, so what would the addiction be? So I'm teasing this apart and take you down a little road here. So is our marriage idolatry? Okay, sometimes it is, because we are thinking that the more miserable we are, the happier the father is, templating him after a false god, worshiping him in a way that we would worship a false god. You see that? Don't worship me the way that they did their gods, by thinking you have to hurt yourself for me to be happy. No, that's idolatry. So there you go. But let's also be aware, it might not be that you think that the father wants you to be beaten and to demonstrate your piety that way. So it might not be idolatry. It might be addiction. What might you be addicted to? Okay. You might be addicted to people pleasing. And not just your spouse is beating you, but everybody's image of you, everybody's idea of you, what they think of you, how they talk of you. Well, wait a minute. I've been married all these years. If I got divorced, they might think of me as, not as great as I want them to. Addiction. People get addicted to all kinds of things. I want to juxtapose that to what worship is, because people say, whatever you think about the most or do the most, that's what you worship. Well, I don't agree with that, and I'm going to tell you why. People can be addicted to things that they don't worship. Because if you're saying that, let's say television, let's just take that. So some people at the end of a hard day, they just want to unplug from the world and plug into the TV drug. And the reason I say TV drug, and I watch TV, but the reason I say the TV drug is because, like anything, essential oils, benzos, alcohol, food, all kinds of things create a brain situation, evoke serotonin, oxytocin, different parts, different calming chemicals in your brain. And we rest and relax, and it feels better. That's what happens. Okay. So we can come home and think, okay, so what's my method of choice to self-regulate after a hard day? My boss was horrible to me. I sat in traffic. I forgot my lunch. I mean, just my day. This was my day, right? Let's say it was a rough day, right? And you come home and you put Heartland on and you're watching Heartland, which is a show I just love. And you're just relaxing and you're watching Heartland. And you're like, oh, look at those horses. They're so beautiful. And you're just like, wow, I'm just so calm. I just feel so much better. Okay. Now, if you want to call that an addiction, okay, you can call it a hobby. I like following this story. It's like reading a book, but watching it in pictures. And I like to see the way films put together. It's an art form and I enjoy it. So I could look at pictures of art and it tells a story. I could even take pictures of art and flip it in a book, because each one that moves a little bit, is that different than watching TV? No. Media. Okay, so I watch Heartland. Now, let's say you're watching TV when you should be doing 1,000 other things, and you know you're being negligent in the things you're given stewardship over. That would be an addiction, because you're continuing to choose this over what you should be doing. Do you know we get addicted to things? Do you know that's normal? That people get addicted? Now, I'm not saying it's great, and I'm not saying it's good, and I'm not saying keep doing it. I'm saying when you recognize you have an addiction, that's the beauty of Shabbat. The beauty of Shabbat is you pull back from everything you're doing. There's 6 days, and you're not doing it that day. You have a set apart day. From my research, and I know there are different people who feel differently about this, but I have noticed that anything that you do for 7 days becomes a habit. So when we withdraw from that in the 6th day, that thing, not a habit, a choice. You choose to re-enter it, but you know you can go a day of the week without it. Okay. Now, if you're addicted to like a benzo, you can't go a day without it, without having seizures or problems, right? So you're definitely having a physical addiction. Now, if you're prescribed something for a certain reason, and you need to have a medication, whatever, but the body does become addicted. Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong if you're, working through an illness or whatever, but your body does adapt and expect. And that's what addictions are, adapt and expect. And yet the idea of addiction is subjective, because when you say whatever you do the most, like say food can be an addiction, right? You need food to live and to nourish yourself, but some people overeat, their body becomes sick, and you're not in shape. And yes, that can be an addiction. And that's one that people, it's hard to hide that one, because some people will even turn into becoming bulimics, because they are struggling with that addiction and they don't want it to show, but then it shows in other ways with their health. So you see, everything can be an addiction. Doesn't mean everything is. You can do something every day. I'm addicted to having wonderful conversations with my spouse, my husband, right? I'm addicted to it. Like if I don't do it, I'm like, man, I just want to do that. I want to talk to him. I want to tell him all this stuff. I want to hear what he has to say. You could say I was addicted to that. It gives my brain good chemicals. I love it. So that's not always a bad thing. It depends on what the thing is. And if I was insisting on having wonderful, great conversations with my husband, and my child's starving and crying, this little baby, and I'm like, nope, we're not done talking about all the things I want to talk about, that's wrong. Okay. So we have to understand the context here. But that leads me into worship. So people would say, whatever you spend the most time on, is what you're worshiping. Now, the word worship, okay. Now, the word work and worship are actually the same in Hebrew to some degree, which brings you this idea that all of life should be worship, because it's the way you live that demonstrates love for your creator. And I'm not going to disagree with that. But I want to think about worship here. Okay, so we have the temple. We have the Levites, right? And they were the worshipers. They were not like unintentional with what they were doing. Let me put it this way. Have you ever truly worshipped like your God? You get that feeling? My friend Rhonda always talks about this. Rhonda Carter, she's a beautiful singer and a very close friend of mine. And she talks about worship, and she teaches about how worship changes the atmosphere. Worship isn't something you do like, oh, I think I worship that. No, this is an intentional mindset and lifestyle that you are entering into intentionally. You are going into worship like there's a divine being that's way above me. I submit to that sovereignty intentionally. I rest in the wisdom and intelligence he has, and I surrender. And I'm getting strengthened through this worship, because all of his love, I can feel it. I'm present. All the glory goes to him. It makes my heart rest in a way I don't even get how amazing it feels to rest. Worship is the ultimate heart resting, where you know that this is so intelligent and incredible and worthy of praise that you just let go. I mean, that's what worship is. It's letting go and entering in. And you're not in charge and you don't have to make decisions. You're just in the presence. And that's a beautiful thing about worship. It's intentional. It's significant. It requires intentional surrender, not accidental submission, like an addiction. An addiction is different from worship. We are not addicted to worshiping in the same way we're addicted to cupcakes. Absolutely, there's a brain thing that happens when we worship, for sure. When we worship and pray, which are intentional things we do, it extends our willpower neurologically. It's scientifically proven. We have more willpower during the day. You know why? The joy of the Lord is our strength. He deserves and delights in our praise, his joy. We're strong, for sure. That's not why we worship, though, or it wouldn't be worship. That would be gleaning strength. Worship is surrendering in a beautiful, restful way to the sovereignty of your Creator and giving him his due because you stop trying to be him and you get out of that mindset of what you have to do. You give in, you let go. You're present. You're all that's in me declares your glory. It's so beautiful. Because if he's glorious, I am safe. It's resting. It's literally believing and trusting that he is all powerful, almighty God. That is not an addiction. An addiction robs you of things. Worship is all things good. So when somebody says to you, go look at your calendar and look at everything that you do, and that's what you worship, don't believe them. Absolutely look at your calendar and say, wait, am I wasting time? Am I too dominant in certain areas of my life to the detriment of my destiny? Absolutely go look at that, but don't receive that you're worshiping something by mistake. You didn't even mean it, but you worship the TV because I watched Heartland for 3 hours. I was 3 hours of worshiping. No, you can't downgrade worship like that. You can't just go into a building and sit there and listen to it and be like, okay, I worshiped. Now, between you and the Father, how you worship, what that is, but there's a template in the temple. Template, temple. These words are all these. This is what I'm talking about. When you would walk into the temple, right, you'd go turn to the right or the left, and the worshipers would go one way and the mourners would go another way to deal with life, right? So when you read the Psalms and David's playing the lyre and he's like worshiping, declaring it wasn't like by mistake. Oh, I think I just worshiped. Look at that. No, he intentionally sang to the Lord his God. He cried his heart out. But worship is intentional. Addictions can just ensnare you. Worship doesn't ensnare you and trap you. Not at all. So when we look at the things that we're addicted to, a lot of the times we're surrendering or submitting toxically in a marriage because we're a people pleaser. We're worried what other people will think. We don't trust that the Father is going to help us. And I say that knowing that divorce is a sober thing to do. But people pleasing. The idea would be the difference between, this is where we're close in religious systems. Let me put it this way. There's a difference between being a witness for Elohim as his people, demonstrating his glory, or image curation for your own pride of who you are. Because if you're so busy trying to convince people you're good, do not pretend or think or convince yourself that that's your witness. That's just a bunch of acting. What's a witness is a reflection, right? I saw how good God was, and that's reflected in my life. But I'm not generating that image and curating it for the public, because that's just nothing. That's not the truth, and that's not going to set me or anyone else free. We can't confuse image curation with being a witness. Being an actor is not being a witness. Now, does that mean, now don't take everything to make it walk on all fours in every situation. Don't do that with my programs, because I'm talking about principles here. This doesn't mean that we don't manage our impulses and our compulsions, because we do lean into the wind here and there and make mistakes. And you know what? We don't need to tell everybody all our mistakes. We have mentors, we have people we talk to and we're close to, and we're going to make mistakes. And what does it mean to be a good witness? I witnessed how good the Lord was, and it reflected in my life naturally because I got it. So I invested in seeing it. I had eyes to see and ears to hear. Image curation is, hey, did you see that I did all the things? I donated to the thing, and I showed up at the thing, and I baked the casserole for the thing. That doesn't mean you're a good witness. Now, there are times you're faced with a situation. This person needs me, but I'd rather go watch Heartland. Okay, sometimes I just got to go watch Heartland because everybody needs me and I'm tired. And you've got to know that line and ride that fence, and that's a tough one. But sometimes, you know what? I need to go and not do something that feels relaxing to me, and I got to give and invest. Why? Because I got to be a witness. Do I want to? Not always, but I've seen the glory of God. I've seen what it means in my life when my neighbor loved me, and I'm going to love my neighbor. And this neighbor needs me. Okay? The weightier matter is going to be the neighbor in this case. But in some cases, I'm going to be the weightier matter because I'm going to need respite, or I'll never know where that line is. Being present in your life, my friend, means you are starting to learn the difference between, first of all, you're not receiving all these weird cliche religious sayings about whatever you spend your time in is what you worship. No, whatever you spend your time in is what your priority is. That doesn't mean you're worshiping it. And it doesn't mean you need to not alter priorities. I always shift and alter my priorities. And I'm never doing it really well. I'm trying. But when I worship, I know it. I don't leave wondering, I wonder if I worshiped. No, I know it. I worship and I rest. I come out of that. It's like, whew, that changed me. I didn't change me. That changed me. The Father changed me. He restored something in me. He reminded me that He's in control and that I'm safe to believe it, and He's worthy of it. He's my provider. Isn't that powerful? So, idolatry, addiction, worship, priorities, self-regulating, these are all realities that we are always trying to figure out which thing the flashlight is shining on truly by the Ruach and not by society. If you're addicted to people pleasing, admit that to yourself, find your trusted others, and pursue a beautiful dialogue with your beautiful family, your sisters and brothers in Yeshua, and talk about it. Talk about what it feels like to be a people pleaser, and how would you show up differently if you didn't people please, and how would you feel, and what might that birth in your life? And get support and be accountable by people that don't shame you. There's no condemnation for you as you're trying to figure this out. You're toiling in the soil. That's what you were told to do, and you're doing it, and it's hard. So I'm not judging you. But we have to start having a little bit more presence to not just letting our vernacular create beliefs in our life, but actually thinking about what you're talking about. And I think the portion today, just talking about marriage and marriage rules and thinking about marriage being an idol, a lot of people wouldn't think of it that way, and then they might think of it that way too much. But temperance, my friends, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. When we fear the Lord, we know we better do what He says. And when we do what He says, guess what? We're blessed and safe. But He's given us marriage so that our lives will be abundant. He's given us marriage to live easier. Even though marriage itself is an investment that takes work, everything does. Owning a car, you have to maintain the car. Does it make it easier to get places? Yes. We have to weigh everything. Anyway, I hope this was helpful to you today. I, am always wrestling with these things. This is the way of the world. This is the way things happen in the world. This is like the way we live and the way that we will always, struggle on this side of the veil. We're always going to be working through these things. It's really important that you understand that. Everybody's going through this. If we can stop judging each other and just be there for each other and encourage each other and be a breath of fresh air for a brother or sister struggling, that's the best you can do. Make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure you remember that the future begins now and God loves you. Yes, you, right now, just as you are. So until next week, shalom.
Let it go, let the teardrops roll. Let it go, the water flow. Go when you're low.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.